excited to introduce our next speaker. I just think this guy is going to be so awesome for you guys to hear. We don't talk about this topic enough. I have David with the Exercise Connection. We're going to be talking about challenging autism with exercise. So I'm so excited to have you here today, David.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I think as we'll learn and talk about it, Kristen, I know you know a lot about all the different therapies and approaches to help our kids. But I think today I'm hoping to inspire and educate some families and professionals out there, because what exercise can do to help these kids is truly remarkable. It's just my job to relay that information and make it possible for other families and professionals to help their kids or students.
Well, what I love is that your background of how you got into this, and because a lot of people, I think exercise is one of those things that they don't really think about. And as you know, I have a son with autism. Exercise is such a big part of our lives, and it's a big part of our lifestyle. But can you maybe give people that are watching right now a little background about why you're so passionate about what you do, and why are you deciding to help the autism community?
Yeah, so it started about 14 years ago. Yeah, 14 years ago, I started working with a boy who just so happened to be on the autism spectrum. I was actually working with his father teaching exercise, and he brought me his son and said, he can't skip, but I want you to teach him sports. And he was on the higher end of the autism spectrum. And for people who don't know, a typical child who can skip can read better than a child who cannot. There is plenty of research to support it's all how the brain works and the harmony of both hemispheres of the brain. So the skipping piece was more intriguing to me. I'm an exercise physiologist and a strength and conditioning specialist. So when I heard that, I wanted to get him to skip. The long story short is I was able to teach him to skip in 4 sessions when his parents, therapists had tried for years. Now, that day changed my life, changed my career path, and essentially changed the families and his. But what I've learned over these last 14 years of now being a paraeducator, teaching at a school for children with autism as a fitness coordinator, what I learned is, yes, I did teach him differently. And that's what his parents said, the approach and the breakdown of exercise. But everyone had a role in getting him to skip. Even though it didn't happen immediately for that boy, there's no doubt that the PT, the OT, the adaptive physical educator played a role in that. I was just able to connect it. So I think, yes, it changed my life and everything, but that's kind of how I got started. And as I mentioned, I've now been a paraeducator and taught at a school for children with autism, and now I'm blessed to go across the world and train both parents and professionals on our protocols.
Well, and what I love is that, so often we go from therapy to therapy, or diet to diet, or even occupational therapy. And can we talk a little bit about the difference between what you do and what an occupational therapist might do in a typical session?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm a strength and conditioning specialist and exercise physiologist, and that's the root of my education. And with that, I was training athletes or adults or typical children. So what I'm doing is looking at it from that scenario or that background versus a therapeutic or I need to fix something. I'm looking at it as I want to get everyone to exercise. However, we know that teaching children with autism or any disability, we have to go about it differently. But I was always under the mindset that I can get them to exercise, just how am I going to do it? And then going to having a background as a paraeducator or working in the schools, what I found is that the way that these children learn in the classroom still today is not brought into physical education or a typical exercise setting. So to answer your question now about what's different than OT versus what I do, OT and PT is critical for their development and should never be replaced with exercise. Exercise should just be an addition. OTs and PTs, what parents need to realize, especially of the younger generation or the younger kids or the early intervention, is more than likely, and Kristen, you could probably answer this better than me as a parent, is that OT and PT will eventually end, right? But our children or adults they're still going to need sensory integration, or they're going to need things to calm some maladaptive or stereotypical behaviors. Exercise is that. So I'm just trying to teach them not only using, for example, dumbbells, which an OT or PT or really even a adaptive physical educator probably wouldn't use for this population. I use it because it can help their muscular development, but it can also give them sensory integration. So when these kids turn to adults and eventually one day go to get a job, or when they're in the real world, there may not be sensory rooms at every corner, but we know that there are exercise facilities. So that's where I want to educate parents of this is what they need as they grow into adults. Or in many cases, if your PT or OT insurance runs out, how are we going to get them that movement or that sensory integration? And exercise really, really is that.
Well, and I think that's a great point. And, you also mentioned that, you're teaching the child a different way. And I think there's a saying that if a child can't learn the way we teach them, we need to teach the child the way that they can learn, right? And so I love that saying. I don't know who actually said it. I've seen it many, many times all over the place. But what I love is that you're right. One day therapy, quote unquote, may run out, but exercise can always be there, and different ways of doing the exercise can be there. I know there's some new research that states 10 minutes of low intensity exercise can reduce things like hand flapping, or people that repeat themselves for basically about 60 minutes. Do endorphins have something to do with that, or is it the crossing the midbrain, or why is that?
Yeah, so why this just came out in 2017, this research, and why this is so powerful and impactful to share with both parents and professionals working with those with autism is the research used to state 60 minutes of high intensity exercise will reduce these stereotypical behaviors. Now, most of these children or adults, especially when you begin exercise with them, they're not going to get their heart rate up to, above a target heart rate or 80% of their maximal heart rate. But again, this study says 10 minutes, which is feasible in a classroom, in a home, or in a PE or exercise setting, right? 10 minutes of low intensity exercise can elicit these results. So this is why I'm so excited to be here and share this with these families and these professionals. But now, can you remind me of, I don't think I answered what your question was now about the 10 minutes. I'm sorry.
So, because the research was stating that 10 minutes of low intensity exercise can reduce hand flapping, can reduce children that often repeat themselves or repeat, when you say something for about 60 minutes. And so, I was asking the question, is one of the reasons due to endorphins in the body? Is it because they're crossing that midline,
Yeah, I think the research doesn't exactly state that. But I think it's exactly what you're saying, or what we know from other previous research in regards to autism and exercise, or autism and OT or PT. It's exactly that. I think it all plays a role. But what the research was showing was that, or what they were hypothesizing was that we saw a reduction in these maladaptive or stereotypical behaviors. And was it just because the exercise was eliciting that same like hand flapping? Now they're moving, but now they had them on either a bike or a treadmill. So is that why? I think there's clearly still so much more to be researched and understood when looking at this community in exercise. But the biggest thing was 10 minutes. And I think that's what I always tried to educate parents and professionals on, is we need to give them, or I want to give them lifetime activities or lifetime exercises that can be done in all those settings, at home, at school, or in an exercise setting or physical education setting.
So now I want to talk to you about this thing called Exercise Buddy that I know you have. First of all, what is that?
Sure. Exercise Buddy is a visual exercise system in the form of an app that we designed about 3 years ago. And the reason I designed this is because, as I mentioned earlier, the way our children learn in the classroom hasn't really been translated to a physical education setting. So I created Exercise Buddy using 5 evidence-based practices and created this application. Now, since its launch, we have 12 universities using it, 4 within research, and we also have positive research studies coming back. But the goal of Exercise Buddy is really 2 things. Obviously, get our child moving, or give them a way to really understand what a PE teacher, an APE teacher, or an exercise professional is trying to communicate instruction to them. But the second, as many parents will probably relate to, or physical education professionals, is what happens is when these children go to a physical education class, which is really the most unsensory friendly environment in the entire school, when they go to this class, they are typically wandering and wondering. And it's for 1, they don't have the supports in place. 2, there's still many APE or PE professionals that don't understand autism or how to support them. And then 3, if they do have a paraeducator, the paraeducator doesn't have the tools to support them in the setting. So while Exercise Buddy is just as important for the kid, it can be even just as critical to get that paraeducator involved to helping them in a class or in PE, because they understand how these kids learn in the classroom. So now we bring that support system, those visuals, the videos, the teaching structures, and now it helps that paraeducator support him in the classroom, or her.
Now, I don't know, there's a law that basically talks about physical education is required for those with a disability, but most parents aren't really aware of that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's through IDEA, and it's really the only thing mandated that says that a child in IDEA or getting an IEP or 504 plan should receive physical education. I think the parents don't know about it is a couple of reasons. 1, they're just not educated in it, which is, trust me, I can't put my feet in your shoes as a parent, but I do understand you guys have a lot going on.
When we don't know, we don't know, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And the schools aren't, they're not going to tell you, or it's not on their to-do list of exercise, right? But with all these benefits showing what it could do, not just from a physical standpoint or autism standpoint, but even in academics, the benefits, it's still a shock to me of why it's not a part of their plan. And then the other thing is that because of this law, there's really no one overseeing it, right? The administrators, they may not implement it, but there's no one overseeing it. So parents are just, they don't know any different. And it's not their fault. So I want to share that with parents to let them know is, yeah, I mean, Kristen, I'm sure you've been in many IEPs and a lot of the parents listening, but if the parents say, hey, my kid should be getting this by law, well, the schools will do it. So I just want to share that with parents to let them know, hey, if you go into IDEA law and read into it, your child should be getting physical education.
Now, is the Buddy, the Exercise Buddy app that you were talking about earlier, is that something that they can ask in their IEP meetings for them, or is that something that they buy potentially and then they can share with that staff, or both, I guess?
I think it's both. I think, again, it's mentioned in a research article that we have that it's assistive technology. And again, by IDEA law, these kids should have assistive technology in certain respects. And when you go into or physical education, that's your communication device. Exercise Buddy can absolutely be your communication device. So yeah, they should, one, I think, absolutely ask for it if it's appropriate for their kid. Remember, this is just one tool in the educator's toolbox to help them have success in PE. But that doesn't mean that Exercise Buddy is going to solve the problem for every child with autism. We know that an iPad or Android device could be a distraction. So you may have to use paper-based products or resources like they are in the classroom and bring them into PE. So yeah, I think it can absolutely, and we're sure. Yeah.
I was gonna say, what I think is really nice is there's so many, I'm assuming, educators out there that really, when they're going through education, there's not a lot often for a traditional physical education teacher, again, traditional, that talks about disabilities and especially autism. And some of these teachers have been teachers for a very long time, which is wonderful. However, when they were in school, there was maybe, if they were lucky, one chapter on maybe autism, if they were lucky. And as we know, if we know one child with autism, we know one child because every child's different. And so what I love is what you talked about. It is a tool in the toolbox of another thing that we could look at and say, oh, wow, I can watch this video, and maybe this is not for the child to watch. It's me as the educator to watch. So then I can then implement what I just learned on that video to help this child in their physical education setting. Because I know as a parent myself, I learned so many different tools and techniques that I then pass on to my son's therapists and things. Because I'm there to try to create the perfect, whatever perfect means, right? The best balance of whatever Jackson, my son's schedule needs to look like, right? And just because it says it in a textbook is going to work this way, sometimes even, I'm sure many people do this, even with Exercise Buddy, there might be something that somebody watches and go, oh, that's a great idea. But you know what, Mark over here, we need to kind of tweak it for his needs. And so often you take things, tweak. Is that something that you have seen kind of in practice with people? By taking your idea?
Yeah, we've seen that.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you already said it, right? If you met one child, you've only met one. And I think I know what in some of in my experiences that I share with my students or clients, I break down and show how it worked for Anthony or Bill or whomever, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for their child or their student. I just try to give them ideas and show them exercises that I found effective for many different reasons. The exercise that can help improve their posture, their muscular development, and embed sensory integration. I just show the ones to both parents and professionals, like, here's what you can do in all those three different settings, at home, at school, or in a gym setting. And then also there are also cost-effective exercises, right? I don't want parents to feel that, well, now I need to go buy a $2,000 treadmill, or now I need to buy this. A lot of the stuff that we use is just using the body, right? Teaching basic exercises, not only that the kid can do, but that the parent can do alongside them if they have the time in their schedule. Or like you said, share with the therapist, right? Share with whomever's, or the support worker that comes to the home. Hey, can you try this with Jackson, or can you try this with Sarah to see if he can or she can do it? So that's what I just want to make it. I think in the exercise world, right? We know, Kristen, I know you're an avid exerciser, is that we always hear about these, try this CrossFit approach, or try this, or try that, or you need to do 60 minutes, or you need to do 30 minutes. And then people just can get confused. And I just want to make it simple and easily understood. And really what I say is, it's about perfection, or persistence, not perfection, right? Less is more in the beginning when you're starting with your children or starting with your students. But if we get them just moving their body just a little bit each day, 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, we can always build on that. But I don't want parents listening to think, I don't have 60 minutes in my day to teach my child. Neither do I. I don't even exercise for 60 minutes some days. But if we can get, the research shows, if you can get 10 minutes, right, 10 minutes, that can have a huge impact. So that's what I want to share with everyone today.
Well, and I think might be helpful is, well, let's talk about maybe what an exercise session might look like for somebody with autism. I think a lot of people right now are thinking, oh, is it like a weight loss thing, like The Biggest Loser, or is it, am I out there at boot camp? No, we're talking 10 minutes. But I'm thinking, let's think about what an average, and I know there's not an average, but just some ideas of what it might look like.
Sure. I think as the parent or the professional that works with the child or the student or the client, they know better than I do right now how they learn best or what motivates them. So is it going to be at the end of the first 5 minutes or the end of the first couple minutes, are they going to have some reward or some reinforcement like we know happens for our kids, right? So you still want to use that in your approach, right? Maybe at the end of the first 5 minutes or 2 minutes on a treadmill, maybe they are getting the SpongeBob video, right? If you or the parent or the therapeutic team finds that that's appropriate. But then, or maybe it's giving them maybe you try like a dumbbell press laying on the ground with some light dumbbells, right? You do that, and then you give them that motivator or that reward, just like you would introduce any new task or activity. But one thing I strongly encourage, is do not give food as the motivator for obvious reasons. And then I think we have a series of videos that we show that are online, that are free, that we're showing that are appropriate to use, and just basic, like if you guys can envision like doing a hip extension where you're literally laying on the ground and you're just extending your hips up and down, your feet are flat. It's a basic exercise that a parent who maybe doesn't have an exercise background can try with their child, that they're in a safe, comfortable position. But that exercise, for example, could be done anywhere, and it can improve the muscles of their glutes and hamstrings, which most of our children have poor motor planning. And some of the reason you may have more motor planning is because certain muscles aren't working or aren't actively engaged. And those muscles of the butt and hamstrings are big muscles that can help our motor plan. So these are kind of exercises that if you look at more of our resources and that we share, again, are basic, simple exercises that can be done. But again, you don't have to do it, like you said, in the Biggest Loser approach. We set small goals of time or repetitions, right? Most people think 3 sets of 10 repetitions is the miracle formula for a typical individual. But for us or for our kids or any of those on the autism spectrum, you can see benefits, physical benefits, from 1 set of 5 repetitions. So that's how I want parents to start to think about this, is don't think they have to do 60 minutes. Don't think they have to do a ton of reps, or at the end of the session be dripping of sweat. You just need to start slow and build your way up.
Well,
does that help?
Oh, absolutely. And I think even, I was thinking as you were talking about Jackson and what we do, and maybe giving a little insight to some families with that. So I know every child's different. Our son, for example, gets very tired very fast, right? I know some kids have tons and tons of energy. He has energy in weird ways. Not to say weird is bad, but not in the traditional ways that we would think, right? Like he might stim and have lots of energy during that. But if we were to try to play kickball, or if we try to run on the beach, his stamina is not what I would think would be, considering he could stim for a lot longer, whether bouncing a ball or tapping. It's just a different type of world for him. And so one of the things that we've done is really try to increase his attention span and his energy level to be able to run from where we start at the beach to the end and back. And what we've done is we've created obstacles along that, right? So we'll stop and we'll do so many squats and make it a really fun game for him. And when we first started, he maybe made it halfway through the beach, like halfway to, it's a pretty long section from where I would say it's round trip is about a quarter of a mile back and forth, right? The best way I can describe it. So halfway through, he would get really tired and he'd say, all done, right? And he didn't want to do anymore. And look, that's okay. And we would like be okay with it. And we would like really praise him for the time that he did give us, right? But we didn't stop each day. We would go back. And we little by little, now this child, and mind you, we've been doing this for a long time, but now this child, he'll stop, he'll run, and we now do over half a mile because he'll run back and forth, and we do squats in between, and we've even taken cones to where we kind of skip and hop around them and make it more of like a fun thing for him. That was his motivation. Everybody's motivation is different. We happen to live close to the beach. His motivation is going to the beach, and so we use that around exercise, and it seemed to really help. But I would think if I would have not had that kind of willpower to want to keep going, after when you first try it and they say they don't want to do it anymore, or, you know, they say, okay, I only want to do one time and that's it. We kept pushing and pushing and trying to see where his kind of limit was. And, you know, now we at least do a half a mile, I would say 4 times a week together, but we make it really, really fun. And we're able to incorporate that back also into the home, where we're actually seeing him now playing kickball for maybe 15 minutes, where before we might have gotten 2 minutes. So do you see that in your, with the different exercises you give as well, to where you have a child who seems to be hyper energetic, like seems to be like tapping and bouncing, whatever, but not putting that same energy into the exercise? Does that make sense?
So to answer your question in regards to, for example, looking at a child who's stimming and putting him into an exercise session, great question. I think about it this way. So you have this child who is stimming, who's got a lot of energy, but now you're trying to put him into a structured routine, just like you're trying to put him into a classroom setting. Now we're trying to put him into an exercise setting. So it's essentially maybe the same thing, again, to use that classroom analogy, where we have to use those supports the way that he learns best, right? Is it visuals? Is it video models? Is it whatever it is? We have to embed those into the exercise setting. And as a parent, or what I've heard from a lot of parents when I've worked with, for example, adults, they've said to me, when I've said, hey, does he use visuals or anything like that? They said, oh, no. He can talk. He doesn't need visuals. And I said, I'm not using visuals in the form of PACs. I'm using visuals as many of us do, as we're visual learners. So I think parents, especially when you're talking about adults and integrating them into an exercise setting, what we need to do is look at ways they learned maybe when they were 6 or 7, because when you're introducing them into this new type of environment or new routine, if those visual supports or those teaching structures were successful when they were 6 or 7, now you're adding it when they're 13 or 14, use those same approaches because they once worked then. But I think you still may see those stimming behaviors, or it may be, you have this high energy kid or client. Well, it still may be a challenge in the beginning when introducing them in an exercise setting. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. So my other question is, you know, for a parent right now that's watching, or even a professional that's watching right now, what can we give them as a takeaway, right? Like, what can we, like, let's say they're like, yeah, this totally makes sense. I don't think that my client, or I don't think that my child's getting enough exercise. What could they try, let's say 3 different things that they could try right now at home, and even if they have to tweak it for their particular kiddo, for any age, doesn't matter if the child's 3 or 22, right? What could they start away, you know, right away?
Okay, so there was something you said that was, I don't think you realized what you said, or maybe what I really want to highlight, what you said earlier, is you said the F word, fun, okay? And what I want parents and professionals to realize is exercise for anyone is not fun. Okay. Because if it was, we wouldn't have the obesity epidemic that we do. And it takes work, okay, for anyone to exercise, whether they have autism or not. But for those with autism, it's clearly going to take more work and strategies for the parent or the professional. But what you did and what you explained to everyone with Jackson is you were developing a relationship with him, right? As a mother, clearly, okay? But as a professional, you need to develop the relationship and the trust with that student or your client, okay? Just like anyone else. But with those with autism, they're hypersensitive, and they need to have trust in you. So, and then third, what you did with Jackson, right, is you gave him ownership of the program. This is all stuff that I talk about in our workshops that you just explained with Jackson. You gave him ownership. He said he was tired. So you said, okay, then let's be done. Let's give him something, do something else. But then now you've gone from a quarter mile to half a mile. And I think that's what both parents and professionals need to really understand is you have to develop that relationship and you have to build that trust. And then you give them ownership, right? Because now they're not told what they're used to in a in a classroom setting or in a PT or an OT, right? They're always told, do this, do that. And they're just, but that's not fun, right? So now you as the parent or the professional say, hey, let's try this. And you ran alongside Jackson. You did these things with him. That's the same thing you have to do as a parent, a new parent or professional introducing exercise. Don't just tell them what to do. Be a part of it, because that's what's going to make it fun for them, is that you're actively engaged with them. And again, giving them ownership like you did will just reap benefits, but it may take time, right? It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen a week. For Joseph, it took him years to be able to skip, right? We have to. Sometimes we as parents and professionals have to adjust our expectations of what is going to happen for our son, our daughter, or our client.
I love that. And now, is there something, I love the fun word, because to me, nowadays, I think people are always worried about the test scores, or if you have a special needs child, they're worried about the goals. Like, okay, we got to check off this box, check off that box. And it's not remembering, like, this is a child. This is I don't care if you have autism or you're, a neurotypical child. Everything you do in life is fun. It should not be a chore to learn to read. It shouldn't be meaning that you hate it so much. And it shouldn't be a chore to go to PE. I remember having a PE teacher. I've had really good ones and I've had really not so good ones, right? Where I would hate going to class and like, oh, we have to run. I remember thinking we have to run the mile, and we had to run the mile on Thursdays. This is like, I think I'm so traumatized by it. And it had to be under a certain amount of time. And it didn't make it fun, because I knew that if I didn't hit whatever that time was, suddenly I was, one, not good enough, right? Two, that meant that I had to run the mile again the next day until I got to that time. And it didn't make it fun in any way. But then I remember having a teacher that made it fun, had fun music on, got to dance, sat there with us, didn't just have a time watch telling me to run. They actually would get out there and play with us. And I think that a lot of what you're doing is that creating that relationship, playing with that child, but giving that child strategies and tools. One of the things I know you said was you were trying to do sensory integration with, like, and I started thinking about heavy work, right? If you're in heavy work, basically, if you don't know what that means, it's a sensory word, sensory integration word. And you were talking about dumbbells, and it made me start thinking, Jackson doesn't do dumbbells. However, what we've done, we've taken like laundry baskets and we've had like books in it, and we've handed him the laundry basket and given him the laundry basket and said, hey, can you put those books in the garage, or can you bring them over to the kitchen? That was one thing. So I think that's the same strategy. The other thing I noticed was, let's say we wanted to go to an amusement park. I then would give Jackson a backpack, and I would put things that weren't like super heavy, but definitely more weighted down. And so that way he had to hold the backpack. I noticed for him, having that extra weight, that, and again, it wasn't a huge amount, but just that little bit of extra, maybe a water bottle, maybe a jacket, it did weigh it down somewhat. My wallet would go in that backpack. And it gave him, for whatever reason, it gave him that a calming effect. And so again, every child's different, but taking some of your strategies and being able to implement that into everyday life, I think is something powerful. It's not always about doing this many sit-ups, this many squats.
Yep.
You know, I think I saw one of your videos where they were doing like a hopscotch kind of thing, you know, where it was really fun and they got to skip through. And I'm thinking, I actually implemented that in a different way in our home because I thought, how fun, you know, and we were able, Jackson loves numbers and things. And so we were able to put what we called Wacky Number Day, and we put all the different numbers around, and we, instead of saying 1, 2, 3, we were able to say, okay, jump to 4 to 7 to 6, and they were all over.
That's awesome.
And again, I love that video that you had. So how do people find out more about, you know, first of all, is your exercise buddy, is that something they can go on, you know, on the regular app and download? How do they find out more about your videos? Because I know you have so many out there. How do they find out about it?
Well, one, you can go to exerciseconnection.com, and that'll link you to videos. It'll link you to the exercisebuddy.com website as well. So it's simple, exerciseconnection.com or Exercise Buddy. On Exercise Buddy, I just want, because we get this question a lot, is it's only available for tablets, iPads, Android tablets, and some Chromebooks. It's not for phones, because once you see the technology and everything, it's just too small. If it was on a phone for the child or the adult to independently navigate. However, when introducing it, parents or professionals may have to do a lot of the navigating for the student, the client, or the child. But I think those are great resources, and you'll find it all on our websites.
And then you have some videos also on your website, correct?
There's there. And then if you go to, and I'll say it slowly, it's nicpad.org. And here's how it's spelled. It's NCHPAD.org/autism fit. Again, nicpad.org, NCHPAD.org/autism fit. There's where you're going to see a lot of those videos that you were mentioning. We did a collaboration with them. They're a national disability organization, and we did a collaboration as I'm their autism expert. So I think those videos will give both parents and professionals a lot of insights of what they can do in various settings.
I love that. Now let's leave parents with something that, let's say the child wakes up and before school, what's something that every parent can maybe try to implement with their child before school? Even if it's not even 10 minutes, maybe it's only 5 minutes, you know?
Right. I think, you know, to use what you were saying earlier about some sensory routine, right? Like I had mentioned earlier about hip extensions, even dumbbells. Now, I want to be clear too, just because I'm talking about dumbbells doesn't mean it's appropriate for every child or adult. I mean, if your kid throws stuff, then don't give them dumbbells. But maybe there's something else that you can replace, like sand-filled water bottles or other things. But I think that could be great. I've had some clients, both before they go to school or after, when they get off the bus, that again could be very overwhelming to their sensory systems. Just run around the block for a minute, right? Or a couple minutes, obviously, whatever, you know, the size of the block is. But even that can help calm some anxiety or give them the sensory integration they need, either before, after school, or after they're on a 45-minute bus ride to a school, which some of our kids are. Give them some movement right when they get off the school bus, and share that with the IEP team and say, look, he needs exercise. He's been sitting in a bus that they're often strapped into, right, for all safety reasons. But how would you feel 45 minutes just strapped in and we are, right, in traffic, and our kids need something before they can go start, you know, there's classroom work. Give them that exercise.
Well, I think often too, the schools, I was shocked to hear this. A lot of schools, they have alternate PE days now, or physical education days, or sometimes they don't even have it that that semester, they have it the next. So like some people will say, oh, I don't have PE this semester, I have it next semester,
Right.
which just blows my mind because we had it every day. And
Right.
I don't understand that. And because I don't even understand that for neurotypical children whatsoever, because I think that's so important for the child to have that to
Yes.
kind of stay, as you were talking about, our obesity rates and everything, but also to stay focused, right? Like to be able to move around. I know that there's studies out there, even before the one we talked about earlier, that talks about moving, getting your brain kind of,
Hmm.
into something different, and having that exercise will give you a lot more attention span, just be able to sit down and listen about history, for example. And to now know that children aren't getting that every day, we definitely need to be
Yeah.
creative in the classrooms, whether it be having what we call heavy work, where that child has maybe even a laundry basket of books there, and you say, hey, go bring this to Mrs. Smith,
Sure.
right? Knowing that child.
Yep.
I've even
Yep.
pace lanes in some of the schools for sensory, where it looks like they take scotch tape or whatever kind of tape and put it in the back, and a child's allowed to get up out of their
Hmm.
seat, whether it be with an aid or if they're able to do it on their own, and do pacing lanes for about 5 or 10 minutes in the back, being able to take care of their bodies. I've also seen on buses where they have like a stress ball, where the parent will put so many things, what they call their bus backpack, and it will have like
Yep.
some fun sensory issues in there, because some of these kids are on the bus for like 40 plus minutes, dropping.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a long time to be on a bus,
Sure.
especially a child that has so much in them. And so I think taking your ideas and being able to implement that, with sensory and exercise, because you're right. You know what? You don't know how long your insurance is going to pay for OT or PT, or if they're going to it at all. And some of these people are getting it 1 hour a week, which also
Yeah.
blows my mind. And so this is something they can do every day. They can incorporate this into their IEPs. They can incorporate this with
Hmm.
their OTs and their PTs and
Hmm.
say, hey, I love this idea and this idea and this idea. Sometimes it only takes a couple, that now the entire
Right.
child's day can be transformed. So I love these ideas. I'm really so grateful. You are giving an awesome free gift to our families that are watching. You have a free 14-day trial of Exercise Buddy Professional. And as you mentioned, it's
Hmm.
available on Apple and Android devices only, not on phones, because we want to make sure we can see it. So anyone that's watching, the link will be here in this video. The other thing is we want to talk about, if you guys really like this video and you want to make sure that you can watch it over and over, or you missed last year's summit as well, you guys can be able to buy those packages at the autismhopesummit.com, because we want to make sure we can give this to you for a long time. I know as a mom myself, I'm usually at 2 o'clock in the morning reading or watching something, and I like to kind of watch it over and over, or I like to share it with those on my team. So I think this is something great that we can do for the families as well. And, before we go, I want to talk to you about one last thing. You talked about this with me privately, that the Autism Exercise Specialist Certificate with the American College of Sports Medicine. Can we talk a little bit about that before we close?
Sure. Appreciate you saying that, because I think this is going to help parents as they, explore exercise options. I think it's going to help them find a qualified professional. But briefly, with the American College of Sports Medicine, which is the leading exercise science organization in the world, I've created their first, and the fitness industry's first, autism exercise specialist certificate to prepare trainers to work with our community. And it's just launching this week, and we're really excited about it, but I think it's going to make a huge impact for these children, for, like you mentioned, the ones who aren't getting physical education, but then to give parents, so they know, who's the right person to send my child to. So collaboratively, and us at the Exercise Connection and with ACSM, we are gonna, you'll probably see some news on this, hopefully, but how we can, reach the fitness professionals, and PE and adaptive physical educators are also qualified to take this, because unfortunately, many of them, like you mentioned earlier, Kristen, aren't prepared to work with our community. So we were able to bridge that gap, or I was, to educate ACSM to say, look, we need to get to the adaptive and the physical education world. So yeah, that's a little bit about that. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, knowledge with tools, because people always say
Hmm.
knowledge is power, but actually knowledge with tools is power,
Yes.
because you have
Yeah.
to be able to have the knowledge and then be able to know how to implement that knowledge.
Yes.
And then one last thing, we talked a lot about this, and I just think it's so important. I want people to have this as like kind of like their last thoughts.
Okay.
The benefits of exercise, there's so many of them, but what's the unexpected? Because I already know we've talked about this in the past. Children that are constipated, that might help with their digestive system,
Sure.
their attention span, what
Yeah.
else?
Yeah. I think the unexpected benefits that I've seen with all of my clients at some level is just the confidence. You can't really measure confidence in a research study, but if you see the confidence of these kids, or a smile now, when that first boy first skipped, big smile. When I was able to get Bill to catch a ball when he was 25 years old, huge smile. But now it's awesome. It's where I know I'm supposed to be and helping this community, but then also for families. I mean, for that mom to see her boy skip, for that mom to see her boy catch a ball at 25 years old when no one had taught him how. I think it gives a lot of families kind of newfound hope and optimism to see this and what exercise can do. And I think lastly, we're using exercise in our employment programs, which is a whole nother topic we can always discuss, but we're using exercise to prepare them, for the workforce and for their work day. But that, again, calms their mind and their body before they go to work. So, yeah, it's twofold, right? The kid gets this confidence, but these parents are seeing things that their kid can do that maybe that they haven't for years or never been able to. So, I appreciate you letting me be a part of this summit this year. I love obviously what you guys are doing, and to educate and prepare these families or give them more insights and tools and resources. So it's truly an honor to be here and present. And I hope that all the families or professionals listening were able to gain something from me. So thank you, Kristen.
Oh, well, thank you, David. And, thank you all that are watching the Autism Hope Summit this year. We're here to try to help. Like we said earlier, knowledge is power, but knowledge with tools is how we can actually implement that. And so, we hope that nobody gives up. There's so much we're still learning, right? And we learn from each other. We don't have all the answers.
Yep.
But all we can do is try to talk to one another and try to learn from one another. So thank you again, David. And thank you guys all for watching. Until next time. Bye, guys.